Hello, my name is Aleksandra Lewicki and I'm a political sociologist and I work as a senior lecturer in sociology at the University of Sussex. I also am a co-director of the Sussex European Institute, where we're currently recording this series of videos to document the kind of work that's going on at the SEI around Brexit and the post-Brexit landscape in Britain and in Europe. And I would like to tell you about an article that I'm currently still working on. So it's work in progress and is likely to be published in 2022. And the starting point of this work is this sort of claim that has been recently repeatedly made by various scholars, particularly around migration studies, that notes that Brexit has brought racism back to Britain. So I was intrigued by this claim because it sort of assumes racism has been gone for a while, perhaps on holiday, and has now returned to structure social relationships in the United Kingdom. And a way in which this claim has often explicitly or implicitly been made is in relation to East-West movers, which is currently a big stone of contention. So there's an academic debate ongoing whether the experiences of people who moved from Europe's East to its West can be described as racialized, and whether the kind of discrimination that they're experiencing is a form of racism. So I thought it's worth revisiting this question because the majority of the literature that has explored the experiences of East-West movers has done that by speaking to East-West movers themselves, right? That makes sense. But if you ask people about their encounters in the everyday and their perceptions and how they're being treated, then they're most likely to tell you things that document racism as a form of prejudice manifested in interpersonal relations. And so I thought it would be quite helpful to take a different methodological approach to this question and actually explore the kinds of representations, how they're being invoked, reproduced and deployed within public discourse, and particularly by influential people. So policymakers, people mobilize around immigration in the public sphere, and also extend this investigation beyond the context of Great Britain. So I did a case study of Britain and Germany, where I and my team interviewed people who are either policymakers or members of political parties, or have in one way or another made their name by mobilizing around issues of immigration. And this is part of a wider study where we're sort of exploring the transnationalization of this type of mobilization, largely against immigration. So we're not directly asking anything about East-West movers and so on, but it was notable that people who speak about immigration in both countries actually quite often also reflect on migration from Europe's East to its West. And so what we found in this data is that people who've moved from countries such as Poland, Slovenia, Slovakia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, so very different countries, very different nationalities, different languages, different histories, they're very often subsumed within this crude category, Eastern European. And for most speakers, this category sort of involves attributes such as backward, underdeveloped, in need of catching up with the West, lower democratic standards, and so on. And obviously, these sorts of histories and descriptions can be traced back all the way to the European Enlightenment, where Europe's East has already been constructed as sort of irrational, less modern, and so on. But they also have quite distinct ways of manifesting themselves today, some of which are continuities, historic continuities, and some of which are sort of currently salient tropes. And so on this basis, I argue in this article that the category Eastern European in many ways operates analogously to other racialized categories such as Black, Muslim, Oriental, and so on, because these categories also quite crudely seem to describe an essentialized form of difference that cuts across various nationalities, languages, ethnicities, histories, and regional designations. However, these different repertoires of racism very often also are invoked in conjunction with one another, are entangled, and serve to mask and reinforce each other. And so what is crucial to my argument here is that their entanglement in the way they operate is not only something that leads to prejudicial encounters in the everyday, but also is productive of structural inequalities across Europe and in these two particular West European countries. And these structural inequalities are, for instance, racialized hierarchies in the labor market, whereby differently racialized groups resume a specifically assigned position within these hierarchies. The second manifestation is stratified social rights. So a West European citizen would have access to different social rights than, for instance, somebody from the east of the EU. And the same applies obviously for differently racialized groups distinctly. And thirdly, there are restrictions to their mobility that also differentiate freedom of movement across the European Union and obviously beyond even more significantly. So to take us back to the sort of starting point of Brexit, what this analysis shows is that people who move from Europe's east to its west are affected by a distinct form of racism that's specifically targeting them, but which is also part of a wider set of various racisms that specifically target different population groups. These racisms have much longer trajectories, and they have by no means been brought back to Britain through Brexit, but Brexit, if anything, contributes to exacerbating the inequalities produced by their means. So perhaps this is where I leave you with what I'm trying to show in this article. I very much hope you find time to read it so I can provide evidence for these claims and all the data that supports these claims. If you have any questions about my research or our activities at the Sussex European Institute, feel free to drop me an email anytime, and thank you for listening.